On a cold November evening in the small town of Millersville, Pennsylvania, the streets were nearly empty. Most of the town's 3,000 residents had already shuttered their homes against the biting wind. Christmas lights blinked in windows, the scent of wood smoke hung in the air, and the old radio in Carter's diner played a crackly tune from the 70s. Daniel Carter, known to everyone as Dan, was locking up for the night. At 58, his hair had gone to salt and pepper, and the years of grief after losing his wife, Joanne, had drawn soft lines around his eyes. His life was small, quiet, made up of the same routines, opening the diner at dawn, serving regulars with familiar faces, and closing at dusk. It was the kind of steady, humble existence people rarely wrote about. But that night, something different happened. Dan was carrying a bag of leftover fries and burgers out to the dumpster when he saw a figure lurking at the edge of the lot. A boy, maybe 14 or 15, thin as a rail, dressed in a threadbare hoodie and jeans far too light for the weather. The kid's face was shadowed beneath the hood, his posture cautious, like a stray dog expecting to be kicked. Dan felt something tighten in his chest. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. A memory of those hard years after Joanne died, when he considered slipping away unnoticed too. "Hey, kid," Dan called, his voice gruff but kind. "You hungry?" The boy froze. His eyes flicked toward the bag in Dan's hand, then back to his face, uncertain. "I'm not gonna call anybody," Dan added, holding out the bag. "It's just fries. Still warm." Slowly, the boy stepped forward, snatched the bag, and retreated to the shadows without a word. Dan watched him for a long moment before going back inside. The next night, the boy was there again. Same place. Same silent hunger in his eyes. This time, Dan left a bag of food on the back steps. Didn't wait. Didn't say a word. When he returned 10 minutes later, the bag was gone. It became a ritual. Every night, Dan packed up the leftovers into a paper bag, burgers, fries, sometimes pie if there was any, and left it out. He noticed small things, the way the boy's shoulders relaxed the tiniest bit over time, how his visits came earlier on stormy nights, how he once left a crudely folded paper crane on the back step in thanks. Winter deepened, and one night a brutal snowstorm rolled in. Power flickered, roads iced over, and the whole town hunkered down. Around closing, Dan spotted the boy huddled behind the dumpster, trembling in the wind. "You'll freeze out there," Dan called. "Come on in." The boy hesitated, wide-eyed, but hunger and cold made the decision for him. He edged inside, wary as a cornered animal. Dan poured him a mug of coffee, adding cream and sugar without asking. "Name's Dan," he said, setting a steaming bowl of stew on the counter. "Don't need to tell me yours if you don't want to." The boy eyed the food, then, in a voice so soft Dan barely heard it, said, "Ethan." It wasn't much, but it was the first thread of trust. From then on, Ethan would slip into the diner after closing. He never stayed long, never talked much, but he helped mop floors, restock the ketchup bottles, even fixed the ancient jukebox once, coaxing it to play Elvis again. Dan didn't ask about his family or where he slept. He saw the bruises, the dark circles under Ethan's eyes, the wary glance whenever a squad car drove by. He guessed enough to know the boy had reasons to hide. Instead, Dan just made sure there was always food, a clean towel in the restroom, and a kind word or two. Ethan started leaving tiny gifts. A polished stone, a rusted key, a drawing of the diner in pencil and charcoal. Little pieces of a boy who'd never had a safe place to call his own. Then, just before Ethan's 17th birthday, he disappeared. Dan searched, drove the back alleys, asked a few trusted regulars, left the back light on every night for weeks. But Ethan was gone. Winter gave way to spring. Years rolled on. Dan's hair grew grayer, and one day, a nurse named Marlene started coming by for breakfast after her hospital shifts. She was kind, quick-witted, with a laugh that made Dan feel 20 years younger. Against all odds, and to the delight of the townsfolk, Dan asked her to marry him. On the day of their wedding, held in the little community church on Oak Street, the town turned out in full. The sanctuary smelled of fresh flowers and old hymnals. Dan stood at the altar, hard hammering, when a commotion stirred at the doors. 12 uniformed officers entered, moving in perfect unison. Faces unfamiliar but proud. They lined the aisle, forming a path of honor, their boots clicking against the floorboards. A hush fell over the guests. And then Ethan appeared. No longer a rail-thin teenager, but a tall, broad-shouldered man in a crisp police uniform. His badge gleamed under the church lights. His face held the same deep, thoughtful eyes, but now steady, calm. Ethan walked slowly down the aisle, his gaze never leaving Dan. When he reached the altar, He stopped and spoke, his voice catching. "Officer Ethan Rhodes, sir. I'm here to honor the man who saved my life." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I was a homeless kid. Scared, cold, alone. Hiding from people who should have protected me. Dan Carter fed me when no one else would. Gave me a place to feel human. Never asked for anything in return. And because of them, I'm standing here today. He gestured to the officers behind him. "These men and women are my family now. And we all wanted to thank you." Then, as one, the 12 officers raised their right hands in a flawless salute. Dan's breath hitched. His knees buckled. Tears streamed down his weathered face as he returned the salute, hand trembling. The church erupted in applause and tears. Afterward, Ethan told his story. How a patrol officer eventually found him. How he was placed with a kind-hearted foster family. How Dan's simple, persistent kindness gave him a belief worth holding on to. "I promised myself I'd find you again," Ethan said, smiling through tears. "And I promised I'd serve others the way you served me." The wedding turned into something greater than a union of two hearts. It became a celebration of human kindness, of second chances, of how unseen acts can ripple out further than we ever imagined. Later, under a sky scattered with stars, Dan and Ethan sat on the church steps. "I never said thank you," Ethan murmured. "You just did, kid," Dan said, clapping his shoulder. And in that unassuming town, an old diner owner and a boy he once saved reminded everyone watching of a truth too easily forgotten. Sometimes, the smallest kindness can save a life. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it might just come back to salute you when you least expect it.